It's Dale here. I'm still on with Romeo. Now, from last time, I have shown many times how you can make a piece of fabric with water soluble. And the water soluble we have is called Romeo. It's very thick, it's 80 microns. And again, you know, this is like, as I have said before, sometimes it's crackly because I don't put it back in its bag. I leave it lying around, so sometimes it feels like that. But I've just to know that when you stitch on it, it is exactly the same, and so it doesn't really matter. And I was reading the other day how desperately important it is that you put it in a bag and store it in a dark place. Well, just knowing what humans are like, we don't do things like that, and we don't always remember, so it's definitely not the end of the world. But to make a little bit of fabric, if you've got two pieces of Romeo, and this is a piece I showed where I printed and had all these lines on, it doesn't matter, I'm going to use it as my top or my bottom, because when it washes out, that printing will wash out because it's on the print. So it doesn't make any difference at all. But you could do all sorts of things previous, and the last time I showed Romeo, this has been printed on it, so it could be an image you printed to use, it could be a pattern, you could have stamped on it, you could have drawn on it with your pen, draw your shapes that you want, so that when you have something like, something like this is just free stitched, but you could have drawn that if you wanted to. You could draw up a grid and draw your little patterns. I just do it free stitch with the dogs down and everything on naught, but that's possibly because I've been doing it for a long time. But if you're new, you could draw your pattern. If you could trace it, get a book with a nice pattern on and trace what you've got. So if you've got one of those pattern books, and I've got a few with wonderful different patterns in, put your piece of Romeo over the top of the page and draw, just trace the drawing and then use it. That will wash out, but it gives you a pattern to work with. Now, I'm just pretending this is all filled up. It could be filled up with bits of threads. What I've used is a bit of silk sari in here for a little piece. I might put a few bits of threads in. I could put Angelina. You could put anything. It doesn't really matter as long as you want it. So if you're making something, say you wanted a bracelet to match the dress that you've made, you can use the bits of fabric that you've cut off when you've stitched and put those between two layers. It is just the way to make your own unique fabric. And I have put fibres inside, as you know, but I won't do that today. I'll keep that for another day. But putting all your scraps in between two, and will cause a disturbance because it affects what you can see. And you pop it under your feed dogs. Pop it under here, under your foot. I usually start in the middle. I bring the bottom thread up, just because then I know it's there. I've got, I'm using Stonehaven, that variegated thread, so it's all over. So if, for example, I had a pattern, I could do a big circle. Done this, you can see how easy it is, really. It's just, take my word for it. If you've never done it before, you've got two pieces of Romeo, put any old scraps in between, hold it very firmly in one hand. Last thing you need to do is to think about hooping it. And this time I'll write my name. And I'll just do some other sort of stitching. Is that you stitch this needs to ring. If you've got stuff underneath, it's going to hold. There we go. Now that'll just do for the moment. Now what you'll have noticed is that I'm moving quite slowly, but I plant my foot to the ground, and so the machine's running quite fast, and I'm just moving along as I like. You can zap all over the place, and as long as you hold your hands firmly, just potter along, you'll have no trouble. If you try and jerk it or do all those things, it might, the thread might break. So this little piece, see it better on the side, is just a very simple little piece. Now let's have a look at something else that I've done. This is not with this machine because it doesn't have the stitches, but if you're putting lots of scraps in to make a wonderful piece of fabric. Now that could again be an insert in a garment. It could be a beautiful piece that you use, and I've used some of the stitches on my Husqvarna, so they're some of the big ones. They're just the zigzags and the patterns, but I've got a myriad of threads, stacks of threads. I've used gold variegated thread, and so to stitch with, but so you've got the other colors. So I am selective in the threads that I put underneath. This one here is quite dark and it's not so easy to see. Whoops, that's the back, but I've used the same sorts of colors, so it's not so definite, not so defined. And this one here, which has not been washed out, I've used, and also it's quite crackly, don't worry about that. See, I've used these threads again with my myriad of colors and the stitch on the top with the gold, and that'll wash out and just give you a lovely piece. So you can make it as big or as small as you want. Just plan that out. So I hope that's given you just little ideas. There's so many things you can do with Romeo. It's such a fabulous thing. And remember, I've got a book which has quite a bit in, a little booklet. And just to remind you that I'm Dale from the threadstudio.com. Thanks for watching. See you again next time. Bye.